Welcome to Perch.Church. We're going to worship Jesus together. If you've been worshiping with us before, you know what to do. Stand to your feet if you have to. Begin to lift your hands. We're going to sing to the Lord, believing what He says about our lives, believing what He says about what we're supposed to do, what decisions we're supposed to make. We need His help in every waking moment of the day. Let's sing this song together. People come together, strangers, neighbors, our blood is one. Yes, it is. Children of generations, of every nation, of kingdom come. Listen, well, don't let your heart trouble. Hold your head up high, don't fear no evil. Fix your eyes on this one thing. God is madly in love with you, yes He is. Take courage, hold on and be strong. Remember where your love comes from. And swing wide, all you heavens, let the praise go up as the wars come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All the children, clean hands, pure hearts, give praise to God. His name is Jesus. Singing, oh, you sing, oh, listen. Oh, lift your voice and sing it out. Oh, you sing. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, you sound real good. Yeah, yeah. One more time, sing. Oh, come on. Trust your word, that your promises are true. We can lean on your grace in every season of our lives. We can lean on your grace, your word for our life, that your word is an anchor together to feast on your word, to study your word together. Lord, you're renewing faith in every heart. Hearts that have given up, that have thought you don't even exist, that have thought maybe this is just a joke because they feel like they haven't seen you move the way others have spoken of you. Lord, I thank you that right now you're breaking up the stony ground of every heart. I feel that thing. Lord, I thank you that you are reminding people of moments when you came through and you made a way. Lord, I thank you that even right now, in spaces in people's lives where they may feel like they don't know what's next, where they may feel like they're in transition, God, you are touching them and you are reminding them that you are leading us and guiding us in all truth. So God, we thank you for what you're doing. We thank you for your promises. We thank you for the ability to freely gather in spirit and in truth, that we're not in a country that will stop or thwart our ability to gather and worship you, Jesus, that we can do it freely. Lord, we thank you that you've been covering us our entire lives. We pray all these things in your name. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, yes, Jesus. You know it, come on, sing it out. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever say, worthy, you say, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, oh God, we do, we live for you. Sing holy. And holy. God, open up my eyes and wonder, and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart, and lead me in your love to those around you. Sing it holy and holy. Come on, lift it up. No one, but there is none be. You open up my eyes, yeah, yeah. Oh, show me, yeah. Oh, fill me, yeah, yeah, yeah. Lead me, lead us and guide us, yes.
Hello, welcome to Perch.Church, where our vision is to love like Jesus. We do this through our 4 core values, which are biblical, relational, open-minded, and service-oriented. My name is Al, and I have the honor of being the pastor of Perch.Church. There aren't too many announcements today, just a couple things on the horizon. One, starting in July, we are going to try meeting together in real person or in real life. And we're gonna try a few different spots out. Okay, so and I'm in the process of finding spaces, public spaces that we can meet. And so, if you want to journey with us, please I hope you're on our mailing list, our email list. If not, you can sign up at www.perch.church and scroll all the way to the bottom, and you can register for our email list. And it'll kind of be like a journey that we're going on, and we're going to try out different spaces and decide together as a community where we want to meet and how we want to meet. So it should be really exciting, okay? It should be really exciting, and it's kind of a exciting season for us. And we're not going to be able to ever come back to this unless there's another global pandemic anytime soon. But in many ways, we are starting over, so we hope you join us in the journey. Speaking of which, we still have our small groups that are meeting semi-regularly. Not semi-regularly, regularly. We have our Pasadena group that meets on Tuesday nights, our LA group that meets on Wednesday nights, and our Glendale group that meets on Thursday nights. And they're all meeting on Zoom still for the time being. So if any of those sound interesting to you, please email me right here, al@perch.church. And lastly, as we prepare to gather together in real life, the few of the things that you can do to kind of help us prepare is to, one, connect with each other, reach out to each other in our community, hang out, grab coffee, grab lunch now that things are starting to open up again, and reach out and just be a community. All right. The other thing that you can do is invite people. Okay, invite people along in our journey. Okay, people whom you think could benefit from being a part of a community, a hospitable community of faith for spiritual wanderers, misfits, and curious. Please let them know that we're here and that we would be excited to have them. And the last thing that you can do is engage. Okay, engage with what God is already doing in our community, and we will have service opportunities available for you very soon. Okay, in our community. Okay, things like Children's Hunger Fund, which we've been able to participate in. Family Promise. Okay, Family Promise. They haven't been able to meet in person for the past year or so. So as soon as they do, we will be ready and excited to be able to connect with our friends at Family Promise again. Okay, so things like that. And so, or you could just continue to engage with what God is doing in your own way. All right. If you have any other questions, or you want to find more content like this, or you want to connect with us, or you want to support our church plant, please visit our website at www.perch.church. And I will send it over now to our scripture reading for today.
Our reading today comes from Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 through 9. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I am about to give them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country, to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go.
So there is this great podcast that I'd like to recommend to you all. It's called Dare to Lead by psychologist Brene Brown. And many of you probably heard of Brene Brown. Her talk on TED has been her talk on TED has been viewed like millions and millions of times. And she wrote several best-selling books, such as Braving the Wilderness and Dare to Lead, which is her most recent book. And she actually has a podcast out on Spotify, which goes by the same name, Dare to Lead. But you can also find it on her website, which I will pull up right now. So even if you don't have a Spotify premium membership, you could still listen to this podcast on her website. And I strongly recommend you listen to the last one where she interviews Priya Parker. Now, Priya Parker is a community leader, and she also has a great book out right now called The Art of Gathering. And Brene Brown and Priya Parker, in this 2-part podcast, they have a really great, honest discussion about what it looks like to start gathering again, to regather once things start opening up fully. Now, there are, I couldn't recommend this book by Priya Parker anymore. This is a really, really great book, especially if you are a leader or a host of some kind who regularly brings together groups of people. But this is The Art of Gathering is a great book that you need to read. But one of the reasons why I like this most recent conversation that Brene Brown and Priya Parker have together is that they're very honest with each other. Priya Parker lays out just a lot of the excitement that she has about gathering together, but she also expresses a lot of the anxiety and fears that she has of gathering together. I found that to be very refreshing because likewise, I am very excited to be meeting together in person very, very soon with everyone. Definitely with our church friends, but also being able to meet with my close friends indoors and not just limited to outdoor or backyard spaces. And, getting together maybe with some school parents or other acquaintances like that. So, about a year ago, once we were a couple months into the COVID lockdown, I just wanted it to be over as soon as possible. But I have to admit, now that we've been in this for like a year and a few months, I have to admit that I kind of got used to it. I kind of got used to this COVID lockdown. Now, it's not that I prefer being in lockdown over, working in public spaces or seeing my church community in person, or being ignorant of my neighbors' political views. I definitely don't prefer it, but eventually I got to the point where I got comfortable with it. So now that I have to go talk to other parents at my kids' school, or I have to prepare a group gathering every Sunday, and now I know a lot of my neighbors' political views, I'm not quite as excited as I was a year ago. And this is part of the reason why we read from the passage that we just looked at today, which is Joshua chapter 1. Okay, Joshua chapter 1 goes over this next generation of Israelites who are on the edge of entering into the promised land. Okay, the promised land that was promised to Moses, the prophet Moses, and his generation 40 years prior, more than 40 years prior to this. Okay, now many of you might be familiar with the promised land, but for some of you who might not be, let me just break it down for you really quickly. Over 40 years prior to today's passage in Joshua chapter 1, God had sent the prophet Moses to go into the land of Egypt and to free all of the Israelites, the Jews, who were made into slaves in the land of Egypt. Okay, this was over 1 million people who were enslaved in the nation of Egypt, and they were basically like Pharaoh's property. Pharaoh was the great emperor of Egypt at the time, and Moses was a lowly shepherd man. Okay, and God told Moses to go to the most powerful man in the world and to give up his property. Okay, these millions of people. Okay, that's kind of like if God told me, a very humble, nobody, like no name, no one famous pastor, to go to Russia, and demand that Vladimir Putin release all his like nuclear weapons. Okay, it's kind of like similar to that. All right. Amazingly though, God gives Moses everything that he needs in order to free the Israelites out of Egypt. Okay, out of slavery, out of Egypt, and they end up wandering in the desert for 40 years. Okay, this is the period of the wilderness. Okay, they end up wandering in the desert for 40 years. But this journey from going from slavery in Egypt and journeying through the desert to get to the promised land should not have taken that long. Okay, actually, just that journey alone by foot, it would have been a couple months, maybe, with over 1 million people. All right, but if it was just like a couple of people, like scholars say, it could have just taken a couple of weeks. Okay, but for whatever reason, this journey ended up taking 40 years. Okay, 40 years where they're wandering around in the desert. Now that makes a lot of people wonder, right? A lot of people think, like, why did God wait so long? Okay, a lot of people ask this question, like, why did God wait so long? Why did God make the Israelites wait 40 years in the wilderness before going into the promised land? But that is the wrong question, you see, because God was ready to send them into the promised land whenever. All right, the correct question should be, what took the Israelites so long to get ready before they could enter the promised land? Okay, what took the Israelites so long to be prepared, to be ready before they could enter the promised land? you have to remember that these over 1 million people, the Israelites, they used to be slaves, all right? And so they're learning what it means to be free people. They also did not have a government of their own, all right? And so God had to teach them what it meant to be their own nation, right? But most importantly, God was preparing them spiritually for what was to come. Okay, God was preparing them spiritually for what was to come. Unfortunately, many of the people in Moses' generation would not see the promised land. Okay, they would die out before they could actually see the promised land. In some ways, it was not meant for them to enter into the promised land. And unfortunately, many of them were too old to change. Maybe just not being slaves was already like liberation enough. And they didn't necessarily need to go into the promised land to know what it's like to live as free people. Maybe living as those 40 years as a free person was enough for them. But by and large, it was probably because they weren't ready yet. Okay, they weren't ready yet to take on the challenges that lie ahead. And here's the thing about the promised land that nobody ever told me, okay? And I wish they told me before I kind of discovered it for myself. Okay, the promised land was not necessarily easy. Okay, we think of the promised land being like problem-free and like free of any obstacles or stuff like that. But in actuality, the promised land was not going to be easy. Yes, the Israelites came out of slavery and escaped Egypt, and they expected the promised land to show up just after a few weeks. But those weeks turned into months, and those months turned into 40 years. And they were getting restless and eventually thought the promised land would show up, but it never did. And it took 40 years wandering in the wilderness to get there. And in many ways, the Israelites kind of became accustomed to wandering